Hey guys, we talked about doing a what you need to get started for a D&D 101 video, what you need to get started for being a DM. So that's this video. It came out a lot later than expected, and I'm sorry for that. But without further ado, here's what you need to get started playing D&D as a Dungeon Master. Nothing. You're God. You can do whatever you want. Okay, well, yes, that is true, actually. You can do whatever you want. You create the game for the players, so let's start there. Players. You can't play D&D as a Dungeon Master without a group of players to Dungeon Master for. So I would say the most important thing is that you have a group of people to play with, whether these are strangers at an Adventure League game. If you're first time playing, I'd probably recommend doing it in a more intimate home setting, if you could. But it could be online with Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or something like that. But get a group of players. And it might take a few shots to kind of get a group of players that you want to play with. Because, you know, a lot of people always think about the players wanting to play with the DM. Like, oh my god, you should play with so-and-so, he's a great DM. But if you're running the game, you also need to enjoy it and enjoy the people you're playing with. And if you don't like that, then it's not going to translate to a fun game for anybody. So, step 1 as a DM, you need players. Step 2, it's not so much a physical item that you need, but more, I would say, an imagination. Obviously, you're playing a fantasy game where you are creating the world, so having an imagination and being creative is probably the next biggest thing that you would need. Now, not to say that you need to be like J.R.R. Tolkien or something like that, where you're writing these long, crazy stories. Some of the pre-written, I don't have one in arm's length, but one of the pre-written campaigns do a pretty good job of setting that all up for you. So you can look at a pre-written campaign, and you could start from the front of that and just read the text that they give you, and just kind of be the rule facilitator rather than a world builder. And sometimes that's all people want. They just want to play, and they don't really care about the grandiose story and, you know, how many accents you put on different characters and things like that. So, you know, but having imagination and some level of creativity definitely will help you as a Dungeon Master. This one I would say is probably more so is the ability to think on your feet. Because you can come up with the best laid plans, and any DM can tell you a story, I'm sure. You come up with this crazy story, and you like spent hours just sitting there, like, okay, they're gonna do this, and they're gonna talk to this NPC, and they could interrogate him. If they don't interrogate him, they could kill him, and this will happen. They'll find this item on him, and hours just designing this whole story. And your players can either whatever it is, they're gonna blow up your story, and it's not gonna happen anywhere near what you wanted it to happen, or nothing's gonna go according to plan, and you're gonna be kind of in a crap. Alright, fine, then you gotta come up with something and roll with it. I've had it where they just thought of something that I didn't think of myself as an option, whether it was a spell combination or just a clever use of a persuasion check or something like that, and it throws the whole game off that way, and they solve the encounter with a method that I didn't even fathom. I've seen it happen in games I've played too, where the DM had this whole thing set up for an interrogation and didn't realize that one of the players had access to Zone of Truth, and it just shut down the interrogate. Like, his whole plan for that game was interrogation, and Zone of Truth just made interrogation not a useful, like, that was not a viable option for that campaign. Because did you do it? Yes or no? No. Alright, well, he didn't do it. On to the next one. So that kind of stuff. But I've also had it where you thought you laid out everything perfectly and gave them all the right tools, and they are just not getting it. They just, you can only do so much without actually telling them, go here, do this. And you just sit there and you're pulling your hair out because you're like, no, that doesn't work. Alright, well, nope, okay. No, that doesn't work either. So, I guess keep going. And it's like, it was supposed to be like a 5-minute little thing, and they were supposed to figure it out, and it ends up taking 3 hours. And you just are like, fuck it, nope, we're done. It's good. Everybody, it's great. We did it. Woo! Next game. So yeah, an ability to think on your feet is probably pretty useful, because inevitably someone's going to come up with something that you didn't anticipate. They're going to do something not the way you had planned, and you're going to need to cover yourself and keep the game rolling. That, now, again, not to say that you can't stop a game to look in a book or something like that. You know what? It's like, you know what, guys? I didn't think that this was going to happen, so I need to look up the rules for blah, 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 or I need to look up the spells for this character, because I didn't think we were going to fight him. So I need 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes. So, like, let's just take a break. Let's go get a beer. Let's make some nachos. Just leave me here with the book. You guys go do your thing. Strategize, whatever you want to do, and I'm just going to work on this. Because the very first game that I ever... do I have the book? Maybe. No, I don't. So say the very first game I ever... It wasn't a Dungeon Master. It wasn't Dungeons and Dragons. It was a different RPG. But I had never played a game, an RPG at all. And silly me, I decided, well, you know what? I've never played an RPG at all. I'm obviously going to run the game for everybody else, of course. So I did. But I was terrified that, like, they would ask a question and I wouldn't know the answer right off the top of my head, and that, like, that would ruin the game. I really wish I had it. I actually took the core book and I photocopied pages out of it and cut them up and taped them and glued them into a spiral bound notebook, and like with tabs on the corner and everything, so like if they needed something I could flip to it in my notebook and have it right away, so that I wouldn't have to like take the 2 minutes to be like, oh, hang on, let me just look at the index. Oh, that's page 30. Yeah, it turns out you can do that. My bad. I was terrified that I was going to ruin the game by not knowing the rules and not knowing every little thing they could possibly come up with. So I painstakingly photocopied this book, cut out the things, and taped them into a notebook. If that's your style of gaming, great, you can do that. But you don't have to go that crazy, you know? I mean, they're going to look to you to kind of run and set up the world and go with that. But as long as you make it fun, and you're having fun and they're having fun, it doesn't really matter what happens. That's the biggest thing, is make it fun. So, getting a group of players, having a little creativity, and the ability to think on the fly is huge. But don't overthink it. You can take a break. It's allowed. Other things you may want to have as a Dungeon Master to get going. I kind of mentioned it in the player side, dice. Now again, it's not necessary. You might talk with your players and say, I have my set of dice. You guys bring your own dice. But as a Dungeon Master, it's not a bad idea to have extra dice, because you're inevitably going to have some player shows up, they forgot their dice, they thought they were in their bag, and they forgot them. So having a couple extra sets of dice is not a bad idea. Dice are cheap. You can get you can spend $10 a set for, 10 dice and 7 dice and like do it that way, or you can buy in bulk. You can spend like $20 and get it's called a pound of dice. You buy a pound of dice for like $20. It's a pound of polyhedrals of all kinds. You've got your 6 sides, but you got your 20s and your 4s and all this mixed together. And I did that, and I really should have just I'll get to it later when we get to a different thing. I'll bring the actual camera up, but I have just like a container just full of dice, and that's like my community dice for my players. If somebody shows up, they don't have dice, you know what, your attack does 8d8 and you only have 1 from your little set, well, grab 7 more d8s and roll them all and see what we do. Just put them back when you're done. Again, talked about a little bit in the player side, miniatures. If you're playing not Theater of the Mind style and you are going to go classic with a grid, you might want to have... You're going to need to have something, if you're doing it on a grid, to represent your players as well as your enemies. These could be printed tokens. You could go like Pog style. If you have Pogs still, you could use your Pogs, really. But like cardboard, circular, or square tokens that you just lay on there that are flat. Again, like I mentioned in the player video, you could do any kind of thing you can find. Parcheesi pieces, Monopoly pieces, extra sets of dice. Here's a dime, throw this on here, Skittles. whatever it is that you want to do to help represent things, you know. Or you can get, like most of us kind of get to at this point, where you slowly collect more and more of these actual little miniature figures. Like, I happen to have an unpainted, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but that's, let's see if he gets into focus. Nope. Maybe? No? Guess not. Well, this is Jane Cobb from Firefly. I have a Jane Cobb in the Janestown, in the hat. It's not Janestown, but anyway, in his hat, he's got Vera and everything. I have a little Jane figure. He's pewter. I haven't painted him yet, but I don't have a base right in front of me here, but I mean, how often is it going to come up in a situation, unless you're playing the Firefly RPG, where you're going to run into Jane, or a similar character to Jane? Well, I have a figure for that, just in case. So yeah, I mean, I always say I'm going to do this review, and I don't. Maybe this will actually be the thing that spurs me to do it. But these are, like, blister cards from Reaper Minis, which is a company that does, that makes RPG fantasy minis. Look at all these. These are, I kept all these so that when I do the review I can reference all of them, but there's a fairly sizable stack, and some of these had 2 to 3 minis in, you know, per. So you might want to get miniatures, because it can kind of help make the game more exciting. And I'm going to do a mention in this week's D&D update video about Heroforge, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, but I had heard about it, but I didn't actually look into it till this week, where you can actually custom make the mini to whatever you want. You design the pose, the face, how much of a smile, and the eyes open, closed, sword, shield, 2 swords, wands, fireballs, whatever. You can go crazy in depth and design them specifically, but you get what you pay for, so you're going to spend $15 for a mini. And, you know, if it's a player character mini, how long is that player going to stick around? How long is this campaign going to run? Is it worth it? I don't know. Me personally, if I'm going to play in a game for more than 2 months, I want my own mini, so I'm going to spend the money. Something else that you might want, obviously, just simple stuff. You're probably going to want to have scrap paper, again, pencils, things like that, just to take your own notes. You guys have seen me do videos on these bad boys, the Dungeon Master screens. Not necessary by any means. They could be nice, though, if you like having things in a quick reference table. Again, the ones that are themed to the campaigns are, at least thus far, are lackluster, in my opinion, because they're mostly art and useless information. But they usually have tables and useful. The official D&D one has a lot of good stuff in it. It also kind of, if you want to build that barrier between you and your players, where you're back here rolling dice without them being able to see what you're rolling, and you want to kind of scare them, it gives you that separation. It's also good if you like to do sandwich stands or something for your initiative. You can kind of put the initiative counters on here, so it's like, okay, that way the players can look, and it goes, alright, first up is, you know, Bob, then Jimmy, then Sean, then the enemy, then, you know, your pet, then the dragon, or however the order goes. And then that way it's a visual representation, so you have, you know, the name on one side and the other side for the PCs, and just like enemy 1 or whatever it is. But it's good because it also prevents you from the DM for accidentally missing somebody, because you're like, okay, and next it's Jimmy. And then Bob's like, whoa, 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 hang on. Did something happen? Because I didn't get to go yet, and I'm number 1 on the list. And I've seen that actually come into play in several occasions, where you just forget that, you know, it happens. You just skip somebody in the initiative, but that visual representation helps everybody. So that, again, those might be something you want to look into. I like using cardstock better than paper, because it's like if there's a fan or something, it doesn't pull it off of there. Or if they're cardstock and you forget your screen, you can actually just set them up on your table in the order you want it to be. Or you could just do numbers, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then give the numbers out. Okay, you're number 1 in the initiative order, you're 2, 3, so on. What other kind of stuff would you want to have as a Dungeon Master? Again, not necessary, but you're probably going to want to have a copy of the Monster Manual. There are very, very basic enemies available in the back of the player's handbook. Nothing crazy, but there are several D&D free official from Wizards of the Coast PDFs that have a wide variety of monsters. any of the campaign settings that do exist, they have like an online supplement that goes with them, and that has a bunch of enemies and magic items, for that matter, in the back of it. So, for instance, Lost Mine of Phandelver will have bandits, it will have a dragon, it will have a Nothic, a vampire, and it'll also have a handful, 5 or 6 different magic items. Same things with Rise of Tiamat and Horde of the Dragon Queen. There's the basic rule set as well, which you can use, which has the basic rules. So if you don't actually have a copy of the player's handbook or the rules themselves, this will give you basically a crash course on what the rules for D&D 5e are, as well as some preloaded characters, which, again, on that might also be something you want to have. If, you know, you're going to have somebody's like, hey, can I bring my girlfriend? Or, hey, can I bring my sister, my brother, whatever it is, to this game? They've never played before, and we didn't have time to make a character, you know, can they still come? And you'd be like, you know what, I have this pre-made elf ranger. They can just play this, and then if they want to come back, we'll make them their own character. How's that sound? And I've kind of done that, and I've also kind of done a sim, like, okay, this is the entire story for this pre-written character. I'm just going to supplant this story on this, like, PC wanted to make their character, but they didn't want to come up with a background. So, here, use this as your background. And that worked out. That's how my mom's playing in the game I'm playing at home. She made a ranger, and then she took one of the backstories of the pre-written characters that was a folk hero, because it appealed to her. So that's something that you might want to have. And again, there's a vast majority, a library of pre-written characters. Wizards of the Coast has a whole bunch, from random characters, you know, Joe Schmo Dwarf Guy, to Drizzt and Farida from Brimstone Angels. Like, they're online, you can find them. From Wizards of the Coast. So, what else do you want to have? Again, we said Monster Manual, because that does give you options for monsters by challenge rating, and it gives you a large variety. I think I actually have a copy of it right here. Yep. So, this book, the 5th edition Monster Manual, is around 350 pages, and almost all of those pages are monsters. So it is a huge resource. It's a lot of stuff, more stuff than you could probably throw at players in a campaign. But there's a lot of variety here, a lot of interesting different creatures, from animals to dinosaurs, beholders, dragons, whatever you need. It's all in here. So I would recommend getting a copy of this. I'd also recommend getting yourself a copy of the Dungeon Master Guide. Again, not necessary by any means, because all that does is expand the options and make your life easier. Gives you ideas, things to look at. Oh, I want to run a game. Well, oh, here's a table to help me build a dungeon. Here's a table to help me build random encounters in the wild. We're playing a level 21 campaign. Here's stuff that I can give to players when they hit level 20 and go beyond that. Here's a whole huge section of magic items and dragon horde tables and things like that. I want to do Dungeons and Dragons, but I want to do it in modern day with laser guns and you know, rifles, assault rifles. Here's some rules for how to get started with that. So it's really just a good resource for you to have. Honestly, again, I don't want to stress anybody into buying these books. And again, support your local game shop, but if you don't have one or don't have the money, go on Amazon there. It's always cheaper. Just throw it out there. Again, if you have Barnes & Noble discounts, 25% off hardcover books, that counts too. But it's probably in your best interest to have one monster manual, one player's handbook, and one Dungeon Master Guide. They will help anybody run any game, so even if you own them and you don't plan on playing, you can go ahead and, like, somebody's going to come over and they're going to run a game at your house. Here's the books. Run the game. I love to play. Again, it's probably not a bad idea to have multiple copies of the player's handbook. Players can have that. That's their deal. But you want to have this, and you want to have the Dungeon Master Guide, because it will make your life easier. It'll give you more options. It'll give you the help you need to make the game fun. Kind of touched on it briefly there. A place to play. In a steady place to play, if that's a big one. You could have players, you could have a great campaign pre-written and all those source materials that you need, dice, figures, whatever it is. But if you don't have a place to play, you're going to be out of luck. Now, whether that place rotates, which is fine if it's not the same place every time, but as long as players have a stability of some kind. Because if you don't have stable games, and I'll talk about this in a second, but frequency as well, your games are gonna just fall apart. So, okay, maybe it's the local game shop on Tuesday nights. That's fine. Go to the game shop. That way nobody has to worry about cleaning their house. Their man cave can be a mess. And that's fine. The real stuff you can't see that's messy is behind my head here over on the table. It's just all GameStop bags and comic books. But anyway, or maybe it's somebody's house. Maybe it's your house. Maybe you have a tiny house or you only live in a studio apartment. But your buddy has, he actually owns a house or has a big apartment, and you're going to go play at his house. Okay, well, then that's where we're going to go. Or, like I said, maybe you rotate. Maybe it's, the first week, say you're playing every week. Week 1 is at my house, week 2 is at the game shop, week 3 is at Joe's house, and week 4 is online. I don't know, I mean, you could do that, but whatever it is. And the other thing, again, with that, is frequency. If you set up a game and you play once, and everybody has a good time, they're going to want to play again. I highly recommend, if it's not going to be a set thing, a weekly thing, whatever it is, before you leave that game, come up with when you're going to play again. Because I play games, when I play with my friends, like my friends from home, my friends from college, and not online, we play about once a month. And that's just because everybody lives so far away. I'm sort of the central point. I have the biggest house. I have a house, period. And I have the room and the room to sleep everybody in beds, not on floors, which is, kind of a nice thing. So, but I got people coming from over 3 hours away, so we can't meet on a regular basis. We shoot for once a month, and we marathon it that whole weekend. Like, we don't stop. We play pretty much 48 hours, or at least 24 hours grand total for the weekend of D&D. But because everybody's so far apart and we're only playing once a month, if we don't sit down and take time before everybody leaves on Sunday and say, okay guys, look at your calendars, does X day work? And if they say yes, then we schedule it right there. You might want to think about doing social media as well. Facebook, if you guys are on Facebook, maybe make a Facebook group for your game. That way there's a place where everybody can talk and you can kind of set stuff up. You could do events through that. Whatever it is, but some way to guarantee and lock down a date. Because if you don't set one up, you might not play again. Because you'll be thinking like, okay, well, I said, before we left, I said, I think it'd be good this weekend. Then you text everybody, hey guys, we good to go for this weekend? And everybody's like, what the hell are you talking about? Oh, well, we talked about playing D&D. Oh, well, I didn't think we were actually going to do that, so I made plans. Sorry, I can't come. And I'm going to actually cut the video here and cut to upstairs on an actual camcorder. But, Matt, if you're playing not Theater of the Mind style, you're going to want a grid. And I have a really nice wet erase one upstairs. I also have dry erase ones, which I don't know where they are. But I have those as well, but the wet erase ones are really nice. So I'm going to cut to the video up there, and we'll rejoin you afterwards. Alright, so like I was saying, you might want to have a grid. This here is a Chessex Final wet erase grid. It uses these wet erase markers, which you get, as you can see, in a variety of colors. And as you can see, I've drawn out a map here, and you can get dry erase ones that use dry erase markers. They're a lot cheaper, but as you know, dry erase markers have a certain smell and an odor to the actual marker itself. But if this was a dry erase one, and I did this, that would come off onto my fingers, and you can see that's not the case. Now granted, the second after you draw it, that'll happen, but if I take my finger and lick it, and then do that, now it's gone. Now my finger's all black, but as you can see, other than that, it won't come off. So I prefer these wet erase ones. This one is hex on the other side, hex grid, square grid. This one, these are 1-inch squares. This I think runs you around $30, maybe a little cheaper if you can get it online. But these I highly recommend. Just be careful when you're folding them. You want to roll them up really nice, because if you fold them, they'll get creases. And it takes a while to kind of iron that back out. But yeah, so I would definitely recommend a grid and one of these wet erase ones. Although the dry erase do work, I don't have them available to show you. But kind of like I was talking about, you can see this tin here is just full of my minis, and there's some pencils and stuff in here. So you can see there's some D&D official minis, but mixed in with some various assorted things. There's a My Little Pony in there. Here's some Christmas Caroler. So, you know, I try to get more stuff like that. And then the last thing I want to just show you that I mentioned is this down here. Again, not necessarily needed as a DM, but you might want to have extra dice for your players. So each one of these dice bags has a different type of die in it. And then I've got all these D6s and then a handful of actual die sets. So, but yeah, that's it guys. I'll jump back downstairs and we'll finish up this video. Sorry about that guys. I realized I filmed that really late at night, and almost a week ago I filmed that. So the stuff actually came out in last week's D&D update about Heroforge and things like that. And I just filmed with the camcorder again late at night, so I was really quiet voiced. So I apologize for that. And because I was so tired, I said a lot. And I don't want to go back and edit it, so I'm just going to leave it in there. And again, I apologize. But I think I've covered pretty much everything you need to have as a DM. So just to reiterate, you're going to need players, you're going to need creativity, and so it's the ability to think on the fly. Again, not 100%. You can just read right from a pre-written book and it'll do your job for you. But even then, your players may come up with something that'll throw you off guard. You're going to need a place to play. Again, not necessary, but having the Monster Manual and the Dungeon Master Guide, not a bad thing to have. It will only help you and make your life easier, make the game more fun. Copy of the Player's Handbook, not a bad thing to have as well. Your players will probably have one, but it is the base rules, so you're probably going to want to have it as well. Scrap paper, pencils, extra dice, possibly. As you saw upstairs, there I had the grid, I had the minis, I had the wet erase markers. They usually come with one black marker, but if you look for any of if you guys had overhead projectors in school growing up, where the teacher would kind of draw on those transparency things, that's basically what those markers are. So if you have those in your house, that should work. If not, you can get them. You saw I have them in a variety of colors. I pretty much only use the black, brown, and green ones, and blue for water, and maybe red for fire. Point of fact, don't leave the lines on your map. There's actually instructions in the grid. I think it says purple and green, or two colors basically don't come off very easily. So you're going to want to make sure you if you're not going to be using that map again, you might want to just wipe it clean. Something else to think about, again, not for intro stuff, but in the future, you may want to pick up multiple copies of those grids. They come in different sizes. You can get smaller ones. Mine's about the mid-range one. There's an even bigger one. But you might want to have multiple so you can draw out maps ahead of time. If you have the lighter colored markers and things like that. So you don't have to stop the game mid-game and draw a map. There is also a company called Gaming Paper, I believe. I'll put a link in the description. But they basically make big rolls of printed paper that you can use, and it's disposable. Granted, you could reuse it, but it is a grid on just a tube of paper. So, and it's a little thicker than your average paper, and I don't think I have the old Dungeon Master or old Player's Handbooks and things used to come with a grid in the back. It's basically like that, but on a roll. And what's nice about that is you can actually cut it because it's paper, and you're not going to risk ruining anything because again, paper. It's pretty cheap. I think 20 bucks gets you like 5 rolls of this stuff, and it's like 24 by 36 rolls. So you could actually do, and I've really liked the idea of this, a piecemeal dungeon. So like you cut out a square out of the paper. This is room 1. You put that down on the table. The players are in room 1. They go to leave out that door to go to the next room. You put down the next door. And this can kind of help if you're doing one of the overhead designing and you roll to make your dungeon, or you use dice to make. There are dungeon creating dice and apps and things like that, so you can kind of plan out everything. And I just like the idea of no one knowing what it is until they get into that room, and having them pre-drawn outs of paper is a lot easier than trying to cover up a map, or like Okay, you go into the next room. Now, hang on. I uncap the pen and draw the next room out, and then, okay, this is the next room. And, like, what if they're like, alright, we go straight to the door, and you just spent all that time drawing out that new room, and they just buzzed right through it. So, maybe having them, again, cut out on... And there's nothing stopping you from having a grid and the pre-cut pieces of paper, even if it's not gaming paper, but just paper itself to... construction paper, whatever it is, to kind of just add to the ambiance. The only other things I can think of that you might want to look into as a dungeon master, not necessarily, again, required, but it might not hurt to look up online videos. There's tons of tutorials. Obviously, you have found this one. But there are other, you can watch live gameplays of other different dungeon masters playing through. Again, I've mentioned it before. I really like Critical Role on the Geek and Sundry channel with Dungeon Master Matt Mercer. He's really good. Like, that's like almost like next level. But Chris Perkins, any of those guys that did any of the stuff for Greg Billsland, any of the guys that did the stuff for the Wizards of the Coast official Extra Life stream, just look for videos of D&D playthroughs. If you're really new, this can kind of help you see how other people play and get, like, because I feel like as a dungeon master, if it's your first time running a game, you sometimes build up, you get this stigma going in your head, and you worry that, like, it's not going to be fun, and I'm not going to know enough, and it's not going to be good. But watch other people play. You'll see how it goes. People kind of roll with it. They joke around. They make stuff up. They forget something. They make a snap rule on the fly. That kind of stuff happens, and maybe seeing other people do that might help you to overcome any kind of qualms and you know, reservations you're having about running a game up front. Yeah, I'd say that's it. The only other thing that I have sometimes found as a dungeon master, you don't need it, and it's not a thing for everybody, but scheduling breaks is not a bad idea. So typically you're gonna play. People are gonna get up from the table, go get a drink, go to the bathroom, whatever it is. But sometimes scheduling your breaks out in advance is not a bad idea. Again, not everybody's going to stick to this, but if you say, alright guys, it's 9 o'clock, we're going to play till 10 o'clock, then we're going to go out and get some breakfast. After breakfast, we're going to come back 10:30, or, you know, noon, we're going to jump back in. That way, if people know, okay, I'm only going to be sitting down playing for an hour, I might as well commit to the hour, and then I'll play through that, and then I'll move on. So I've kind of done that with some of our online stuff, because that kind of gives everybody an idea, since we're all not in the same place and can't key off of one another. Okay, we're going to take a break for 5 minutes at the end of every hour, and then everybody goes and does their thing, and that's great. One more thing, if you're doing stuff online, test it. Test it ahead of time, because you're going to... We've had this issue even more recently when we tried to play online. We got there a half an hour earlier to test it, and all of a sudden there was an issue with Steam or an issue with Fantasy Grounds, or somebody's computer didn't update, and now it doesn't work. And nothing is more upsetting than getting together to set up a game to play, and then you can't because people can't come. So, yeah, I think I've covered pretty much everything you need to get started as a dungeon master. Again, make it fun. That's the biggest thing. Make your game fun, and make sure you're having fun making the game. Because if you're just kind of going through the motions and not enjoying creating the game, then it's going to show, and the players aren't going to want to play, and nobody's going to be happy, and it's all just going to fall apart. So enjoy what you're doing. Go as nuts as you want with your crazy ideas for your stories, or as barren as you want. But as long as you're having fun and you realize that that's going to translate into fun for your players, that's really all you want. If you guys have any questions about dungeon mastering more specific to a campaign you're running or a campaign you're planning on running, feel free to leave comments in the comment box below. You can email me at nerdimmersion at gmail.com. Hit me up on any of our social media, and I will gladly, I answer, you know, every comment that comes up on YouTube and any emails that I get. So I will gladly, you know, answer any questions that you guys may have. But, you know, if you guys have questions and you kind of want to get opinions, let me know. Also, I'd like to hear from you guys, because I want to start incorporating this in kind of a weekly basis. How about a story of you as a dungeon master? Do you have... Tell you what. Tell me a horror story that you had for running a game. Something that went horribly wrong. That you know, that you can laugh about now. And tell me something that went, like, horribly right. You know, something that you didn't plan, and you didn't have a plan for it, and it just turned into this whole huge thing and became, like, your player's favorite moment and one of your favorite moments of the whole game. I have a good example of both, but I'm not going to tell them to you here. I'm going to wait till I hear from you guys, and I'll make a separate video about that. So anyway, guys, good luck out there. Happy gaming, and I'll see you next time.